Thanks for listening to another episode of our podcast for event planners, presented by Purplepass. Today, we are sitting down with the Center for Higher Education Retention Excellence, an organization whose mission is to help improve policies and practices that lead to increased college retention. While focusing on success in higher education, the organization recently shared their thoughts on how the pandemic will and currently is altering how we learn. They also share an abundance amount of resources on their website. We will be discussing all of this later in the episode. So let's get started.
Okie doke. Well, I'm David Johnston, and I created CHERE 7 or 8, I guess now 8 years ago, partly because I wanted to do more in-depth work on college access and college success. For what we call challenge students, basically underrepresented first-generation students, and that I had a lot of experience doing. So I created a nonprofit organization. I incorporated it under an established organization, Hartford Consortium for Higher Education, and began by putting on events, conferences, all related to retention in one form or another. And Alan joined me about, I've lost track now, Alan, 4 or 5 years ago when we started working together. And we fairly quickly evolved into a team. And thank goodness for me, because Alan brings a big skill set to the table, and much appreciated. Alan, what would you like to add about yourself?
When I met David, I was Dean of Magnet Schools at Goodwin University in Connecticut. And I had been an urban principal both in Waterbury, Connecticut, and in Philadelphia. So I was coming from the world of high school and college, working directly with students, which is why, as David pointed out, it was a good combination because we brought very different skill sets. We have built the rest of it together. And as he said, we are focused on creating connections between people at the college level. We did conferences for many years. Obviously, we haven't the last year, but we've done them digitally. We've done them through Zoom. So we have maintained that, that standing in the community where we're the vehicle to bring people together to confront issues that they deal with on a daily basis and working with those challenged students that David mentioned.
For the listeners out there, Donna just joined us in case they're going to be like, oh, he just popped up.
Okay. So, Savannah, for years, I taught foreign language at the high school, and I ran an Upward Bound program for 20 years and a McNair program at Wesleyan University. And for the last 10 years, I've been writing grants and advising people on educational opportunity programs, and been involved with some state, regional, and national initiatives to advocate for educational opportunities, particularly for low-income first-generation students, which is my passion and interest. And as of, is it 2 years? I don't know, a year or so ago, David and Alan asked me to join their team because a lot of the work we're doing was parallel. So I've been privileged to work with this team to do what they shared with you that we do.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to ask you guys more about the virtual events because I want to see how that's been going. But what are the typical types of events that you guys host? I know I went through your website, saw that you guys do conferences. At least you've been doing virtual ones now, and then are there little like panels?
Well, almost everything has been in the context of we sometimes call them conferences, sometimes we call them convenings, which is a little more targeted and usually by invitation only in a smaller number of people. But they've all been related to retention for challenged students. We've looked at first-generation students. We've looked at the barriers that different kinds of students encounter. We've looked at financial aid, a whole bunch of related subjects that cover a pretty broad band. Last year, I guess twice now we have done 2-day conferences. The one 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I guess, on first generation students was 2 days separated by about 4 months, but it was one conference and we had mostly the same people who came back. Last year, we did a 2-day event on 2 consecutive Fridays, which was an interesting challenge. See if people would come 2 Fridays in a row on 2 different campuses nearby on the subject of the future of higher education, which was a much broader sweep. And we looked at a lot of different issues. It wasn't just about retention, although that's still at the core. And as we have done several times, we brought in a national speaker from a national higher educational organization. We do that occasionally, although one of our favorite things to do is to just find experts on our subject within our network, because there are many of them. And we bring them in and usually do a panel. Sometimes one of them is a keynote speaker. Other times, each of them presents and then they respond to each other. The other piece that is, I don't know if it's unique, but it's maybe somewhat unusual that we do, is that we are big on student involvement. And we always have students at the table. We always do a student panel. At the big conference last year, we had one student panel on racism on campus that was moderated by a student with about 4 other students, and they ran the whole thing. So we're really big on that kind of leadership development. If we're going to focus on student issues, we need to have students at the table.
Yeah. I love that. I definitely agree. And for people listening, if they aren't familiar, could you just explain retention to them? Just
sometimes called persistence, but it basically means people get to college and they continue to be there, ideally to thrive. And what does it take to help them through that? What are the issues? And we've looked at those in detail. And I think the piece that I sent you on sort of high impact practices are the kinds of things that not every campus has done all of those, but that many campuses do to purposely attract challenged students and to provide the supports to help them. So it's everything from helping them before they get to a school during the summer, sometimes called a bridge program, to make sure that they matriculate and to basically be an extended family for a lot of students, because a lot of the more challenged students, often lower income, often students of color, although not all, don't have the family context that we call a college-going culture. We didn't invent that term, but college-going culture that just assumes that you'll go to college and that you'll have family there to back you up. A lot of the kids we've worked with over the years and featured at our conferences don't have that kind of support. And we work on the techniques through both on campus and through community organizations to provide that kind of support. Sort of, I sometimes call it re-engineering the organic family for students.
Yeah, I definitely
if I can jump in a little bit.
Yeah.
The other aspect of retention actually is not a word that resonates with students, whereas persistence is. Students have to persist, but the college is trying to retain them. So the other aspect of retention that's really crucial to us is if you're a college, and colleges, let's face it, are businesses. They've got to get to a point where they're bringing in enough revenue to be able to support the programs and students and faculty who are there. And your students come for a semester and then leave, that's not a good business practice. So a lot of the people that we deal with, our primary audience in these conferences is most of the frontline people who work directly with students, who run student support services or run student centers, and the administrative people who kind of support them. We have many college presidents who come. We have college deans who come. We have faculty members who are engaged. And from their perspective, their thinking of retention is, I have Alan Kramer here as one of my students. I want him to be successful because he's one of our students, but also if our students leave us, that's not good for the institution. Mm-hmm. So one of the other things that CHERE is known for, in addition to what David was saying about engaging students and putting them at the table, is that we engage our members in these conferences. Many conferences you'll go to, you'll have an outside speaker who is not connected with anything that's going on your local campuses, and people may learn a lot from that person. But we are trying to bring people together so they engage with each other. So the dean of this college and the president of that college and the faculty member of some other college can exchange ideas and suggestions. And we often find that the people who come to our events will go back and connect with each other and invite them to their campuses. We're trying to build that capacity because they have a stake in the success of their students, both as educators, but also as people who want their institutions to thrive.
Okay. That was well put. Now I understand. Yeah. And back to like what you were saying, David, it hits home for me because I was also a first gen student. And I think people just don't realize like you definitely need more resources out there for them. Just because, like you said, we're not grown up in a household that like pushes college, pushes a higher education. So I definitely like really appreciate what you guys are doing. And we had a great support at my college, but I can see like others where there's not so much. It would definitely be hard. I wanted to see how your guys' virtual event went. That was last Friday.
Well, Savannah, we've actually done 1, 2, 3, 4 virtual events. The last Friday was the first one that was basically a whole day. Mm-hmm. And like some previous events we've done, it was a partnership with another organization, the Connecticut Association of Educational Opportunity Programs. This was their annual conference, and I happen to be the vice president of that organization, CHERE, we call it for short, and responsible for planning their conferences. So, but the first time we did all day, we were a little nervous about it because we weren't sure we could get people to hang in there with us. But Donna had been through some of these with other organizations and assured us that if we built it, people would come. And we ended up with, I think, about 45 people on, including some people from other parts of the country, which is, of course, something that can happen when you're doing a virtual event. But we had done, over the summer, we did 2 2-hour events, one with just students. We had 6 students from 5 campuses on for 2 hours talking about how they were doing and what they expected for the fall. Then we did a 2-hour version with some higher ed people to talk about really what they expected for the fall. Then in October, we did a 2-hour event partnered with an organization called the Sons of Thunder, which has worked primarily with young Black men and mentoring with kids in Hartford. And we did a conference on mentoring for them and with them. So we've often partnered with other organizations to put on events. But last week was this full-day partnership to talk about trauma. And we had a national expert, Dr. Karen Gross, who's written a terrific book called Trauma Doesn't Stop at the School Door. And she talked through the different types of trauma, how to define it, how to understand it. She had us doing hands-on exercises, which was interesting to do in a virtual setting, but we did it. We drew pictures. We did things in silence. She had us standing up and exercising at one point. So that was really interesting to see how that would work. And by and large, most of the folks stuck with us for the day. We lost a few people probably after lunch, took a break, and people could, go to the kitchen and get lunch. And we had really positive feedback on the content. And as a part of the registration fee that goes to this organization, we partnered with CHERE. Everybody is going to get a copy of her book. And we're just in the process of following up with that now.
Nice. Okay. Oh, sorry.
So that was last Friday.
My mic's being weird. Okay, so I want to make sure. So for you, did you guys do virtual events in response to COVID, or you were already doing? Okay.
Now we have been talking about doing some webinars that would be virtual, but we hadn't had the time to plan them. And then when the COVID business hit, it was pretty clear that everybody had to go virtual. So like other organizations, we adapted. And fortunately, Donna has more technical expertise than Alan and I have. And although Donna, you have certainly gotten better at that. And it's because it's challenging, especially last week when we had a lot of different things going on. And, there's always some kind of a glitch when you're dealing with technology. But by and large, we did fine and got through it. And people were listening and participating.
Savannah, I wanted to add, too, that one piece that we really wanted to do with the challenge of these conferences, even on the one that I was on a few weeks ago, which was maybe three. Well, actually, it was on two that were maybe 3 full days. And there's the biggest challenge with these conferences is to be able to have interaction with people. Like in real conferences, you see someone in the hall, you chit chat informally.
Yeah.
And that's, as a businesswoman, that's where I get all my contacts from, is that informal piece. So 2 things in the conferences that I went to is one, they had some fun events in there that forced you to engage. Like one of them was sort of an after hours social hour, and they had a couple little programs that were very interactive and fun. There was one about a quiz focused on the state that was hosting the conference, like where was Whole Foods founded in? And they had machinery or a little software that, the first person who answered would get, a higher point and score. So it was kind of a fun social activity. And the other thing is, I had hoped with their conference last week, I had been watching a lot about virtual Thanksgiving. So I was suggesting to everybody, hey, get your lunch and join us back, and we'll hear some stories that we as a committee had shared about each other. But unfortunately, maybe folks were just overwhelmed. So that piece didn't go off as I had hoped it had. People really ate their lunch and didn't come back until it was time to come back. But it was a fun thought, and I think it could have some benefit and value as we go forward.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Savannah, another piece on last Friday is that because the subject is deep and complicated, we arranged with our expert, Karen Gross, to do a follow-up. So we're going to do a 2 or 3 hour virtual event, I think February 5th, with the same people, and they get that for the fee that they paid. They will have received the book by then. Ideally, they will have read it or at least looked at it, and we'll probably send them some homework, maybe a case study to do. We haven't worked out the exact agenda yet, but we agreed that it would be desirable to do a follow-up, and I think people were enthusiastic about that. One other little point, Donna mentioned some of the fun things that she experienced with other conferences. We did a raffle at the end of the day on Friday, and the president of KAOP, Rob Vody, he was able to project a what do you call it? A roulette wheel.
Oh, that's funny.
What I can't remember, Donna, had everybody's name on it who was participating, I think.
Yes, it did.
And then he was able to spin it, and just like a roulette wheel, it went fast and then slowed down and then pointed at somebody's name. And we had a couple of raffle prizes to give out. So that was just a fun thing to do virtually.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we really are all getting so creative.
Yeah. And another thing, sorry.
No, go ahead, Donna.
So another thing that I've noticed, which has been very fun for the workshops I've participated in, they have, since you don't have a booklet, they have a, what do you call it? They have a little PowerPoint that rotates in the beginning, and it sort of flashes the stars of who's going to be on the PowerPoint. And I've learned that they have they'll play little jazzy snippets of popular music for 30 seconds. You're allowed to do it for 30 seconds for free. And so they'll do these little snippets of music to kind of get you in the mood. Like before our conference, somebody said, I'm dancing, to sort of, and also we've done it where we have gorgeous headshots of beautiful people that are sharing, that's being flashed in a few minutes before the beginning of the presentation. And that sort of creates a festive, lively era. With this last week on trauma, I chose songs like Help, Like a Bridge Over Troubled Waters. David suggested Stairway to Heaven by the Grateful Dead. And just some moving pieces, 30-second snippets that would give you an idea or get you in the mood of the theme. So that sort of, helps to liven up things.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Actually, Stairwell to Heaven is Led Zeppelin.
Oh, did I say it wrong? Sorry. I was clearly not familiar, but I took David's suggestion on that. But I think those are little things that, first of all, the beautiful headshots make the people feel really important who are going to be presented. And they also, I heard several of the panelists say, wow, I'm, in such distinguished company here, and it makes them feel good. And it drives up enthusiasm to the participants of who they're going to be hearing from.
Yeah.
And Savannah, if you have 4 hours someday, one day we can send you the recording.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You can whiz through it because it's a lot.
And for your guys' virtual events, I just like to ask this question because we have a lot of listeners doing what everyone else is doing, trying to transition into the online space. What software do you guys use for the streaming or for hosting it?
We've used, Zoom, of course, for the presenting, and then software. So you can, Zoom gives you, I always record it to the cloud because all kinds of things could happen with your own machine or you could get interrupted. So Zoom will record it and then I will download it because the recording is only valid for, I think, 2 weeks. So I will download it into, there's several different cheap softwares. I mean, I have a Mac, so I download it to iMovie, or sometimes I'm forgetting the name of the other software, and I just clean up like the where you're chatting and stuff. Everybody here, are you ready? And cut out stuff to shorten it and cut out, bloops or mistakes to make it short and tight. And then I post it to Vimeo. I mean, you could post it anywhere. I do it because they're such large files, and it, I don't always want to trust my own machine
totally.
Anyone, they don't have to download it. They can just listen to it and it doesn't take up a lot of time or space.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah. I always like to ask that because we have a bunch of event planners coming to us and asking, and there's so many options. So it's really about finding like what solutions do you need and then what works for you. So.
Yeah. I will say, a couple of our options have required a little price, for the Zoom version that we have for webinar and also for Vimeo. But, when you're doing this like we are, it's worth it, in the long run.
Yeah, exactly.
Options out there too.
Exactly. So you guys plan, I mean, we obviously don't know what's going to happen. We're still waiting with the virus. So you guys are planning on doing virtual events for the long haul for right now, right?
Yes. We actually we have regular business meetings on Tuesdays. So we talked yesterday and we have another partner who has just joined us. I was hoping to get him on today, but I think he's probably going to call in at 12:30. We'll have to get in touch with him. Ariel Robinson, who is a younger counselor at Goodwin University, is going to join us. But we were talking yesterday about possible future events, and we're looking at 2 or 3 different things. The organization we have partnered with on mentoring, Sons of Thunder, we're probably going to do another event looking at how inner city students are interested in being involved in sports, getting a scholarship to school. In some cases, they have, mostly unrealistic notions about playing for the NBA or in the NFL or something. And how do we coach them effectively? And we actually are going to try to engage some coaches and some young, I don't think it has to be all men, but young athletes, see how that has gone.
Okay.
So that would be, again, a partnership event. We're also talking about looking at the trauma issue, only from a slightly different angle around mental health on campus, and inviting some mental health experts from several campuses and some students talk to us.
Sorry, David. I was
Go ahead.
going to add that we're focusing on what are the lessons that we've learned from COVID. In other words, how are things going to be different going forward as folks deliver services, or how they think about and manage their time, which there are some precious, really good lessons that have been learned, even though we all crave the visual and personal interaction with people. But there's some really good, strong strategies that we'll take from this.
Oh, yeah. And I was going to ask you guys, just to wrap it up, I was going to say, if I could have each of you guys kind of just share your thoughts on how the pandemic is changing higher education, or how it will, and then maybe like a tip for other educational programs and schools out there looking for ways that they can keep students engaged and on track during COVID, I think.
Alan, why don't you tackle this first question on how the pandemic is changing higher education? I know it's a big, tough question, but you can do it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big thing. I was just thinking maybe just share a few thoughts about it.
Sure.
Well, I think one of the things that's obvious, and we're doing it right now, this is a very powerful tool. Mm-hmm. I think we were intimidated by the idea of trying to do things virtually because it felt less connected than what we're used to, which is face-to-face with students. But practically speaking, I don't think we're ever going back. I think that there are going to be significant numbers of students who are going to say, you know what, I don't need to drive to a campus, or I don't need to live on campus. I don't even need to be involved with all the other activities. I can get the information I need to this way. And I think that the virtual era, the hybrid courses are going to become much more dominant moving forward. I think that's clear because students have gotten used to it. The great irony and the great challenge here is that the students who have money, who can afford to go and live on a campus, will have a much more enriched kind of experience. It's the same students who we are dealing with who are going to have to make the equation. Do I want to spend $40,000 a year to live on campus, or do I want to do this at a distance? And I think the great challenge that we will face in CHERE, and we will face in higher ed generally, is, are we going to be creating from this two totally different educational systems? One for those who can connect with people and live with people on campus, and the other for folks who are just going to dip in enough to get the information they need and the certifications they need to go to the next step. And I think that's going to be a huge issue moving forward, because I don't think the student who has gone through this is going to say, you know what, I'm going to find the $40,000 to live on campus. So we're going to be grappling with that. Mm-hmm. So that's my one thought on that, about the permanence of some of the changes and the way information is delivered and the way students learn.
I think Alan's right about that, but I also think that traditional age students coming right out of high school are still going to want to try the campus experience, the living in the dorm, and all the things that happen on campuses. And of course, schools are terrified about losing the capacity or the willingness of students to come and do that. It's a financial issue for them. They're lost revenues and so on. But I think Alan is right that we're not going to go back from having virtual learning be a part of higher education. And I think the hybrid model is going to be what's going to be happening. And I think the schools that continue to be creative about that while still trying to attract those students who can come to campus, either can afford it or can find the financial aid to do it, that is still going to be there for the time being.
And I'll say that for many people, so long you could be passive about work or school. Basically, you just showed up, and sometimes you were into it, or not into it. In this climate, you could just goof off and never show up and never be anything. But I think this is forcing people to be self-motivated, to determine that they need to grow up, they need to show up, they need to buckle down and be self-motivated, to be organized, and determine what it is they want to get out of the end of this project or time that they're spending, and have something to show for it in the end. So, for a student, for a professional, I think it's really forced folks to engage in some self-regulation and self-discipline to get anything done at all. So I think, that's going to be a plus if people can really grow with that and not fall back into, oblivion and get nothing and do nothing.
Yeah.
At one point, if I may add it to what Donna was saying, if you look at what's going on at high schools right now, up to 20% of the students who we tend to follow, who are the first generation students, the urban students, have disappeared from high school programs. And we haven't really looked at that because as Donna said, we're looking at self-regulation. We're looking at the students who are trying to engage. We have a whole lost generation here that we haven't had a chance even to begin to think about, who are elsewhere in terms of where they are in process. And there are probably 10% of them at college as well who just sort of dropped out along the way that we have to find and bring back into the fold.
Maybe that's a conference topic, Alan.
Yeah, that could be.
Savannah, I know you want to wrap things up, but you asked, did we have any tips for people?
Yes. No, I definitely want to hear the tips.
Yeah, I think this applies to not just college, but also to K through 12. I have a daughter who's an elementary school teacher in New York City, has been teaching online for 8 months. I think the overused word for institutions, whether it's K-12 schools or high schools or colleges, is constant communication. Many students are feeling lonely. They're home, they're there with family, they're sick of seeing their families every day. I don't know about you guys, but let's see, I got my door closed, so I think my wife can't hear me see the same people every day. It can get overwhelming. Students need regular contact with campuses, with teachers, with counselors, with administrators, even if it's just a text message that says, "Hey, Jimmy, hey, Joni, how are you doing? What's new? Anything we can do to help?" That then leads to the more substantive connections around the coursework or whatever it is they need to do. I don't think schools can over communicate in terms of staying in touch with students, because students are really desirous of connections.
Yeah, I definitely. Mike, I agree on that, because I in school, when I was in school, we did the hybrid learning, and I went to class, but then you do it online, and it's just, there's a different, at least for me, it's definitely a different learning experience online versus in person, and you lack that interaction with your teacher, with your peers. It's hard.
Well, they both have their value.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why the schools that are going to do well, I think, are the ones that can develop a hybrid model that uses the best of both.
Exactly.
And Savannah, it's worth reminding the people who listen that our focus is on a specific subpopulation. We're not saying that this is the way it is for all students, but the students that we focus on are, generally speaking, urban kids or rural kids who are not part of the normal, you grow up, you're going to go to college because your parents did generation. And their needs and their problems, their challenges are very different.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Donna, is there any tip you want to give before we wrap it up?
I would just say, with this period, that students and professionals need to determine, what am I going to have to show for, at the end of this period? It's not the ideal situation, but in the end, do I want to have squandered my time, or do I want to have taken advantage of the isolation and really bone up my skills and improve what I can do and what I can be, given this time of lack of interruptions by people and socializations and distractions. And that's not always easy to do, but it takes a certain bit of self-determination to say, this is what I want to have come out of this in the end.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely, there's definitely different types of people. It's either like we use this time to improve on ourselves, like you said, no distractions, and really grow, or we don't. So yeah. Okay, well, thanks again, guys. I really enjoyed talking to you, learned a lot, and I think it's really going to help our listeners out there and our educators out there that are like, how do I keep my students going?